I'm outside. It's after work ride in the sun. What? I genuinely can't believe it. I cannot believe it's sunny. It's also really warm and I am really overdressed. I'm wearing thermal long bib tights because those are the only long bib tights I have, the thermal. And it's like 16 degrees Celsius. So I am warm and I've got nowhere to, I mean, I've got nothing to take off, you know what I mean? I can't swap it, but it's amazing. It's so nice. People are out and they're happy. Sunshine makes such a big difference. It's the second week of April. Oh, and this is honestly the first warm evening I feel like we've had. It is beautiful and the birds are singing and I just couldn't not come out, even though there's a really weird cloud on the hilltop a couple of miles away, like really weird. Can't really describe it. It sort of looks like cloud is like spilling over the hilltop and coming down into the valley, but it's like white cloud, so I don't know what that is. I hope it's not, oh my god, it's so warm. I hope it's not rain, although then at least I will be adequately dressed. Anyway, point is, I'm out, it's sunny, and I'd planned a different video for today to make, but because one must go outside when it is sunny in the UK, that video is going to be the same video but a different format. So the video I'm making is actually how to find French campsites for cycle touring, which is obviously a sort of computer heavy video, but obviously I've already been sat behind a computer for all of today and the sun's out and it's warm, and so I'm cycling instead. But I'm still going to talk you through in some way how to find French campsites when you're cycle touring and how to book them. And this is going to be focused around Normandy and Brittany because that's what I know, but you can apply it to other campsites in France too, obviously. France has the benefit of having an awful lot of campsites and an awful lot of municipal campsites, and they've changed a lot from when I was a kid and we'd go to municipal campsites all the time, but they're still brilliant. In fact, now they're even better. A municipal campsite is one that is owned, I believe, by the local village or town, and it's operated by them, so it's usually very affordable, and a lot of campsites in France are really affordable anyway, especially the lower key ones, but municipal campsites are even more affordable. They've always got all the basic facilities. They used to be, just back in the day, just like fields in the middle of a town, but now they are usually way better. They've got toilets, showers, maybe a little shop in the reception, all those kinds of things. Sometimes they've even got covered areas where you can cook, or little like common rooms that you can go in as well. So assuming you've already got your route planned out in France, or at least you know your major route, then the first thing I suggest that you do to find a campsite is literally Google search municipal campsites in the areas where you know you're going to want to stay overnight. That's always the first thing I do because they're just so cheap and they're normally amazing. But another thing to know about French campsites is that you're going to find a hell of a lot more near the coastline. So if your route follows a coast, or in fact like it's quite sensible to plan a route that follows a coastline, you're going to do so much better for finding campsites, especially on the northern coastline, so Normandy and Brittany. You cannot move for campsites. Brittany is just campsites everywhere. So what I personally do is plot the entire route on Komoot, break it down into stages, and then I look for campsites at either end of each of those stages. And I do that literally by selecting show campsites on the map, which is a really easy way of doing it, but you should always double check the campsites that you do see on there because some of them might be closed down, you never know. But a lot of campsites only have their listings on somewhere like Google Maps, so that's why I do most of my research there when it comes to actually finding and booking campsites that I'm going to use. So you found a good looking campsite, but you click on it and there's no information, or maybe there's some really old reviews or really old questions on the Google listing, and then you click through to the website and it's actually just like a random campsite conglomerate kind of like curated list with zero information. This is a big problem with French campsites. Also, if you're trying to book quite far in advance, you might be trying to book like in March or beginning of April when the campsites are closed in a lot of these places, because they only open for the tourist season in the sort of late spring, summer and early autumn. And some of these campsites, when they close, their website closes too and their phone lines close, so you literally can't contact them, which kind of makes planning your cycle tour a little bit hard, especially in places where there just aren't that many campsites. Because of this, I highly recommend that you keep your route quite fluid until you've booked all your campsites, because you might end up in an area where you literally can't find any accommodation at all that is in your price range unless you want to go to a hotel or something. So for the cycle tour that I'm doing this year in Normandy, I've changed the route quite a lot since my original route, and also I've reversed the route entirely, like reversed the ferries and everything, which I had booked. I had to pay an admin fee to reverse the ferries and everything because I'm doing a linear route. So I'm arriving in one French town, I'm leaving from another, but to the same English ferry port. So I've already had to reverse my route because of campsites not being available at the time that I wanted them to be, which perhaps I should have known given the sort of season that we're going in. But this has only happened to be in Normandy, and it's only because it's the D-Day beaches, which are really, really popular. And so a lot of people travel out there before the summer holidays start, which I hadn't actually factored in to my original plan. I'm used to going to Brittany where it is dead in June and it's absolutely perfect for cycle touring, because you can literally camp pretty much in any campsite. You're never going to find one that's full. It's actually amazingly difficult to cycle ever so slightly uphill, like I mean imperceptibly uphill, until you turn around and then you realise that you're going downhill slightly. This is another disused railway disused railway line. I'd actually forgotten how hard it is to cycle, think and talk and to hold a camera at the same time. So I'm just taking a quick break to do that now. So that's another thing that you need to remember. Do some research on the holiday destination that you're going to in France when you're cycle touring, because Brittany in June, for instance, and probably the beginning of July are extremely quiet, and it's really easy to just literally rock up to a campsite and they'll probably have space. And if they don't, if you're on the coast, there's going to be another campsite not too far away that you can go to instead. Once it starts getting into the summer holidays, there's so many campsites in Brittany that you're probably going to be okay, but definitely book ahead if you can. But when it comes to Normandy, it seems to have a slightly different busyness because of those D-Day beaches. So in June, especially around the D-Day landing anniversary, the 6th of June, it's going to be incredibly busy. Millions of people go. And obviously Normandy is another really popular beachy kind of place for tourists to go in the proper summer holidays, like July and August. So definitely book ahead and book far in advance as well, if you're going to go cycle touring in Normandy in any time of summer. But for Brittany, while I did book ahead most of the time, sometimes I only booked 1 or 2 nights ahead, and I found that in June and definitely before that, then they're going to be really quiet and you can just turn up. Do bear in mind as well, when it comes to availability, that a lot of campsites do not open until April or May, so absolutely check the opening seasons. And if you're going cycle touring in March, then 100% expect a lot of those campsites to be closed. It's so nice out here. The birds are just cheeping, I can hear the river running. It's in a valley, so there's no wind. It's so nice. So back to actually booking campsites themselves. I can speak some French, but it's not good enough it's not telephone French, let me put it like that. I can definitely do it in a campsite and make myself understood and be understood, that's fine. But on the phone, absolutely not. Never tried it and I never want to. Actually, that's not true, I have tried it once. Didn't go that well. So it doesn't really appeal to me to find a campsite on Google that has no website at all, no way of contacting them except for a telephone number, because that just seems like a recipe for cringe, if you're asking me. So instead, I always go to campsites that have functioning websites, and they don't always allow you to book online. The best ones do, like a lot of municipal campsites allow this too, where you can actually see their availability and just book it online. and that's really great. That's the best scenario, because then you've got documentation that you've booked it and you can see the availability and you know that you're going to turn up and everything's going to be grand, and you can also book the right kind of pitch rather than having to try and describe your situation, the fact that you're a person or people with a bike or bikes. But failing that, a lot of campsites have email addresses where you can book them and check their availability too. When you're booking earlier in the year, like April and May, if you're booking somewhere like beach campsites in Brittany, for instance, then that's probably a really good way to go if they don't have an online booking function, because you can just send them an email and they'll probably have availability and then they'll, you know, respond. The French don't typically speak fantastic English. It's not like maybe Germany and the Netherlands where like a huge amount of people do just speak fantastic English, and obviously you can't go to France expecting that either. So I personally write all those emails in French, and I can read it for a start when they respond, but if I'm unsure about exactly what they've said, which I do miss things often, then I'll put it into DeepL or Google Translate, and that will obviously tell me what they've said. But if you don't speak any French at all, then you can give it a go with Google Translate as well, like formulate your message in English and then use the translated version. It's going to sound translated to them. They're going to know that someone's used Google Translate. They're not going to mind, and they will probably understand what you're trying to achieve. At the end of the day, saying, hi, can I book a camping pitch, which is emplacement, but whatever, it looks like emplacement in French. You can learn a bit of this vocabulary as well, and you'll just be able to pick out different words and know the right words to use. But when you type into Google Translate, I would like to book a camping pitch for one person, one tent with a bicycle, that's going to translate pretty easily. It's not going to sound beautiful to the person receiving it on the other end, but they will 100% know what you mean. They'll know you're trying, they'll know you're from they'll know your English for a start, but they will reply in French, and you can just feed that back through Google Translate and you'll know what they've said. It's all pretty straightforward. I don't think that, my grasp of French obviously makes it easier, but I don't think not having any French is going to be an obstacle for you, because Google Translate and DeepL, things like that, I'll put the links below to DeepL especially, they're so good these days that, it might sound a bit clunky, but you'll get on fine. Another thing that's fantastic about French campsites is that they almost always are set up for cyclists. If it's a campsite where you can take a tent, which most of them are, but obviously some are just for motorhomes and vans and stuff like that, caravans, they will usually have a specific rate that is cheaper than everything else for just cyclists and hikers. So often you'll see that it will say hiker, which is randonnée, I don't know how you pronounce it actually, but whatever, and then cyclist, so it'll have the word vélo somewhere in that. They'll have specific rates which are just for one person, one bike and a tent, and obviously you can then add another person onto that and it'll be like an extra €4 or €5 or something, and those are typically, in my experience, between €8 and €20 a night for that kind of pitch, depending on where you are. Brittany is cheaper than Normandy, it seems. I don't know if that's because Normandy is just a bigger tourist destination, or it's got less of a coastline than Brittany. Brittany's obviously got a huge coastline, so maybe there's just more competition, so it keeps the prices low. But most campsites have those rates where it's just for hikers / cyclists with just a tent and no car, like that's kind of the point. And you don't get electricity with a lot of those either, that you can usually add electricity on if you want, but then you'd have to have one of those crazy campsite adapters, so I don't do that. And I do have a tip for electricity, like charging stuff in French campsites, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Another thing that I've noticed that French campsites are starting to have an increasing amount of now, or rather an increasing number of French campsites have these now, is these little hiking cabins that I've shown in a video before, and I loved it. I booked it for one night when I knew it was gonna rain, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I've booked one other one on this tour as well, and it was like ridiculous expensive, like €30, considering most of our pitches for this cycle tour are going to be like €10-12. So this one is quite expensive at 30, but it's another like cute little hiking cabin, they're called, and it's so amazing. So look out for those as well. Sometimes they're a nice little treat when you're cycle touring. As he just turned around and I'm just streaming along, not pedaling at all, just absolutely flying. And honestly, it looks so flat. You don't realise you're going up the hill until you turn around. I'm not pedaling. It's absolutely amazing. I bloody love this route. I love slightly downhill, what's the word I want to say? Slightly downhill railway lines. They are the best for just a easy breezy cycle. They're not good for fitness, I don't think, but they are actually, because it's a slog on the way up here. And then you turn around and you get this gift on the way back, unless you obviously do it in the opposite direction, in which case you're just going to get punished. Okay, so how I make sure that all my campsites line up in the right order is that I literally open up I find them all, find good looking ones in the right places, make sure that there's a doable distance in between them, and I check all their availabilities and then find a different campsite if one of them, you know, falls through and it doesn't have availability or something. And then I will line all of those tabs up in my browser. And I'm talking about a week-long cycle tour here. Obviously, this would be unwieldy if you were going for much longer than that. And you don't always have to book so far in advance or so militantly. I just like doing it personally, because then I don't have to worry about finding a campsite at the end of my cycling day. I know I can just turn up and it's fine. So I literally find all these campsites, find that they've got availability, if they have online availability calendars. If they don't, I will email them first to check. But then when I've got all my eggs in a row and I know that they've all got availability, then I will book them all in one go. Like, I will just spend an hour booking up campsites and making sure that everything works out well. I found this is the best way to do it because you never know when a campsite might, you know, if you book 2 and then wait a couple of weeks, you might find that a lot of other people have been booking their holidays and suddenly your route isn't going to work anymore, especially if it's inland where there are fewer campsites. But if you do find yourself in that situation, look for the nearest town or even small city and just look for municipal campsites, because they probably will have one. Otherwise you might find jeets, or some B&Bs will have camping facilities in their garden. Some farms do as well. So also look for camping ferme, so F-E-R-M-E, and that is the word for farm. It's very similar to the word for closed, but without the accent, or with an accent. Oh, I can't think about that while I'm on a bike. Another thing I personally do when looking for campsites, and this is usually in areas where there are loads of campsites, so along the coastline of northern France specifically, although the coastline of western France will be the same. It's like so many campsites, so you can really take your pick. I look for campsites that have good access to supermarkets, so I try and keep my cycle tours as cheap as possible when I'm in France. And you can find out exactly how much I spend on cycle tours in France in this video up here. I guess that doesn't really work. Can't really gesticulate when I'm holding the camera. So I never eat out when I'm cycle touring ever at all. I don't think anyway. We always just buy food in supermarkets and then kind of just eat cold food really. We eat a lot of baguette, a lot of celery remoulade, which is amazing. You know, lots of like taboulés, pasta salads, that kind of thing as well. So it really keeps the cost down, but that means that ideally we want a supermarket pretty close to a campsite, within a few kilometers bike ride anyway. And to do that, I literally just go onto Google as well and type in supermarché, and that will bring up anything. Knowing where these supermarkets are really helps me plan that route, because if I know that we're going to camp near a supermarket, then we don't need to stop at one before we get to the campsite, and we can camp, set up the tents, do all that kind of stuff, and then we can cycle to the supermarket without having full panniers and being weighed down. We can weigh ourselves down with delicious French food instead. Okay, so this is finding French campsites adjacent, but deciding what to do about charging stuff is increasingly a big problem, obviously, as people have more shit to charge. Like, I've got my GoPro to charge, my phone, which doesn't have the greatest battery in the world, and I use it for navigation. Then I've got my watch, which I also use for navigation and route recording in general. And so these things can make you sort of feel like you need electricity. I'm not going to buy or carry one of those weird campsite adapters that caravans have. The main one is that I have a power bank, so one of those little USB power banks, so that I can leave it to charge in campsite toilets and stuff overnight, where that's usually the place where you can find plug sockets pretty easily. And I'm obviously not worried, but I'm not charging my phone in the campsite toilet, so I'm not worried about it getting stolen. Not that I really would worry about that, to be honest, because campsites are so friendly in France. But no, I charge my power bank there. But also when I'm actually looking for campsites, if there's choice, then I will look at the reviews and the website if they have a decent one, which they don't often have a very detailed one. I'll look at the reviews to see if they mention like a common room, because a lot of these campsites now have common rooms for hikers and cyclists. And they might have a kettle in there, they might have the book swap, and they'll just have some tables that you can, you know, eat your food at and things like that. Sometimes they'll have microwaves and things. Anyway, what they do usually have is plug sockets, so you can charge your stuff there. And I'll do a combination of charging my actual devices if I'm there, like reading a book or eating or something, or charging my power bank, and then I can use that to charge my devices overnight or whatever while I'm cycling. So I really recommend looking at the reviews of campsites to see if they have those kinds of things, if they have common rooms and stuff like that. What a ride! It's still sunny. Look at the river. And the garlic. Oh, it's so beautiful. Anyway, so that is how I find French campsites for cycle touring in northern France at least, and I know you can use the same tactics for the west coastline as well. But I'm going to leave that there now while I'm cycling, because I'm almost home and my battery on my GoPro is seconds away from dying. So I hope this was useful. I hope I've somehow managed to show the UI of the map, Google Maps, finding campsites, all of that, somehow successfully while I've magically been cycling. This is a bit of a new thing, but hey, at least you got to see some real blue sky. You got to see what it's like to cycle under blue sky and in the sunshine for once. I mean, it doesn't happen often in my videos, but you know, I do try. I hope this was useful, and let me know in the comments if you have any tips for finding French campsites, or campsites anywhere for cycle touring really. Like, is there somewhere weird that you cycle tour all the time that has quite crap booking facilities? Or have you tried to find up a French campsite not speaking French and made an absolute arse out of yourself? Tell me that too, I love to hear it. Anyway, thanks for joining, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.